Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm delighted to have Steve Newman with me today. We'll do a little introduction to Steve in a second, but you can see today's agenda on the screen. So let me go straight into that introduction. I've known Steve now for 15 years or so, I think. Everywhere he goes, there's great feedback. He's a highly respected individual, but he's steeped in recruitment. So probably over the last 30 years, starting off at PA Consulting in the 80s, ending up conceiving, launching, chairing and growing a company called Intersearch, which is an international executive recruitment practice. And that business grew from early beginnings to 100 plus offices in 35 countries. Pretty impressive, eh? The American publication Executive Recruiter News ranked Intersearch at number 11 in its worldwide top 20 recruitment businesses. So how about that, from an idea in someone's head through to execution? Now, in recent years, Steve's been delivering Miller Heiman development programs for about 15 years. More about that shortly. But he's an associate coach at Ashridge Business School. He's got an MSc in executive coaching from Ashridge, and also holds qualification in team coaching and mentoring. Steve, very impressive background there. Welcome to the session today.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed, all loud and clear.
I have difficulty getting my head out the door with all of that. Thank you.
Okay, well, well deserved. And as I said, certainly the clients I've introduced you to over the years, the feedback's been outstanding. So it's a pleasure to finally have you here.
Thanks.
Now, for the purposes of the delegates who are on the session today, you can ask questions. There is a Q&A capability. So if you do have a question, pop that into the chat room. I'll pick that up and then pose that question to Steve, as we go along. So if we get straight into this, what's your view on the current state and trends in business-to-business selling?
I'll give you three sources, Mike. It's a big topic on its own, but I've drawn from three sources. The first one is CSO Insights. Now, that's a research company that's been looking into sales performance for 25 years, and they've been tracking customer buying behavior for much of this time. But recent trends in the last few years, they describe as quite disturbing, because business-to-business sales performance has become really challenging, and customers in many sectors are marginalizing the impact of salespeople. To give you some examples, fewer revenue earners seem to be making their targets. Win rates are falling, according to these studies. Conversion rates between leads and first conversations seem to be falling. More people are getting involved in the buying decisions than ever before, so sales cycles are taking frustratingly longer. Customers are doing much more research on their own before deciding to arrange a meeting with someone who wants to sell them a product or a service. And customers are also reporting lower levels of satisfaction with those sellers as well. We can go into some of that in a little more detail, but just two other examples, one-liners really. Accenture in 2019 reported that 74% of C-suite executives reported an ongoing and significant increase in disruption to their strategies due to shifting customer demands all the time. This was a 3-year trend. And hot off the press from yesterday, I must confess I haven't read the whole report yet, but I've just got Miller Heiman's 2020 Trends in Sales Management report. I've not read it all, but one theme I spotted reveals that sales managers are spending twice as much time on internal tasks like forecasting and administrative duties than they spend on coaching their salespeople. And yet, time spent on coaching salespeople, we know, results in a double-digit increase in win rates and quota attainment. There's quite a bit to think about.
Very interesting. I suppose because our audience, of course, is recruitment professionals, their key interest will be less about what, I don't know, Google and Microsoft might be doing, and more about what's happening in recruitment. And now, of course, there are many things that transcend any industry, but if we can look at how is this directly impacting the recruitment industry, what would your thoughts be on that?
Well, the recruitment leaders I've worked with have noticed similar trends. Many have expressed concern to me that their consultants have not found it easy to close business. Even contingency fee firms are seeing more fee negotiation, demands for better service levels, longer guarantees, generally tougher commercial terms. I always, when I think about these things, I often cite a story, a true story of one recruitment firm CEO I was working with, or more exactly, the RPO team that they had on site with a global client. And the VP of HR sent an email to the CEO, which basically said, "You've done a great job filling most of our vacancies, about 85 to 90% of them first time, well done. However, you've not come to me with any new ideas for the last year. So for next year, unless you can come up with a more innovative approach, I'll put the contract out to tender." So for me, the golden thread that passes through all of this, regardless of the industry, but perhaps thinking about recruitment specifically, I truly believe but customer buying activity has become much more focused. You can use the word smart if you want, aggressive, better informed. You choose the word.
So that person you referred to, the buyer, was looking for added value over and above just filling jobs. Is that right?
Yes, I think they're looking to minimize risk. Many buyers are bonused on performance and cost cutting. I've had one in this morning myself. I've sent the proposal twice. Now commercial are involved. They want an even more formal proposal. It doesn't stop.
Okay. And what would you say are the reasons why this is happening, or has happened more commonly in recent times?
I think there are many reasons, but for me, three in particular stand out. Firstly, let's be honest, we've had quite a few years now of political and economic uncertainty. That has, without a doubt, put pressure on businesses and those who buy in products and services from outside. They're expected to maximize value, watch their cost, and minimize risk. Secondly, there's no doubt in my mind that B2B buyers of goods and services and solutions have become a lot smarter. Selling skills have not moved on much, in my opinion. A lot of investment has been made in sales technology rather than sales people. CRM systems, if you think recruitment, candidate management systems, web-based apps. We don't have time here for too many examples, but I'd sum it up as a focus on sales analytics rather than sales people. The problem is human beings, they're not wired to change at 5 p.m. after a training session. They need to talk to their trainers and their coaches. After that, they need time to support and adapt to new ways of working. And I guess that brings me to the third reason, which somebody's told me, I've nicknamed this, but I'm sure somebody else invented it. I call it Amazonitis. Even professional B2B buyers are consumers first and foremost. So when they go into work, they now have the same expectation. They're used to doing their own research, finding out what's available to them. They expect delivery very quickly and probably right first time. That consumer mentality, I think, is now getting embedded into business-to-business buying and selling. The buyer thinks, I can do my own research online, I can buy my business products and services, just like my sports equipment or my camera or my office supplies. So customer expectations are changing significantly.
Interesting, and I'm sure, having brought some of these things to the forefront of everyone's mind today, hopefully there'll be a few ideas that we can look at practically of things that we can do to counteract that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it takes time. It takes a different approach, for sure.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that, if I may, shortly. Yeah. And again, just to repeat, if anyone has questions, please pop them in the chat room. So on the screen now, you can see a question about a recent survey that you shared about buyer expectations, and 32% only of those surveyed said the salesperson exceeded them. So what does that mean for the future of recruitment fee earners, particularly with the advent of AI? I was going to say around the corner, but it's here already, really.
It is. It is. No, absolutely. I'll finish with a little story of a PowerPoint slide I saw earlier this week on that subject. But let's just talk about that 32%. The survey showed that 62% of sellers met expectations. And on the surface, you think, well, that's not bad. 62% meet expectations. That's okay. But if you think about customer experience, just meeting a customer's expectations means you're vulnerable. Customers are not loyal when you just meet expectations. I'll give you a bit more context, perhaps. The same survey asked buyers, where you have a business problem, how do you solve it? Pick your top 3 sources that you go to for a solution. This, by the way, is the CSO Insights survey that I talked about at the beginning. The top 10 most frequently selected resources that were listed included things like, I go to trade shows and conferences, I talk with some of the past sellers I know, I talk to third parties, I talk to our competitors, I go to vendors' websites, I talk to peers and colleagues. Talking to a salesperson came out at number 9 on a list of 10. And that suggests why perhaps so many buyers in the survey have got this feeling that the sellers meet expectations rather than exceed them. If I am a buyer and I don't view salespeople as really helping me solve my business problems, and when I say salespeople, I'm talking about recruitment fee generators here, people that are, running desks and trying to bring recruitment fee revenue in. Then the buyers are thinking the way I engage with them is going to be different because they're not really helping me. So what does this mean for the future of recruitment fee earners? Well, I guess it depends on how the buyer sees the recruitment profession and the firms they deal with. If the customer sees recruitment as a homogenous service I can get anywhere from any recruitment firm, that will add strength to the belief that the recruitment profession is being commoditized. They can expect recruiters to accept a brief online, try and fill it, keeps the cost down, keeps the speed up. That perpetuates the idea of meeting expectations. It makes it easier to think of all recruitment firms as being the same. So when they all look the same, what am I going to do? I'm sure you make mention of this in your programs. The customer will think I'll buy from the lowest cost solution. I'll buy the lowest cost solution. Where sellers exceed expectations, that's the 32%, then there's perhaps a higher correlation between exceeding expectations and buyers believing this seller, this seller really understands my business and my challenges, and they bought me much more than a few CVs. That person came to me with new ideas. So if this research is reliable, and I think it is, then I think one community of recruiters has got a good future, and perhaps one community of recruiters, the future's a little less certain if you're just meeting requirements.
Well, do you know, Steve, I've done events where I've worked on, let's say the session I'm doing is client meetings. Okay, and I've got, say, 50 people in the audience, and I say, show of hands, how many people have met at least 5 clients in the last month? And some hands go up. How many have met 10? Fewer hands. 15, fewer hands. 20, hardly anyone. And 20 odd years ago, I was routinely meeting 20 customers per month, prospect customers and existing customers. Networks, building relationships, coffee, sandwich, beer after work. And part of that was sharing ideas, salary updates, even basic things like that, So is that a simple tactic that you would advise, or are there any other things that, that could help a recruiter to move away from that cold relationship into being seen as a trusted partner?
It's become more difficult for sure, but I think, you asked me to reflect on what solutions might be out there, and we will come to that. But I think it is important that recruiters are seen and continue to be seen as professionals wherever possible, and not just seen as CV shifters. The balance between interaction with customers and sharing information in the ways that you said, where it's possible, and adding value to those that need it, getting to the hiring managers and the decision makers, and not just dealing with procurement all the time, is an integral part of this. Because let's face it, procurement have got their agenda, and their agenda is to make sure that the process is efficient, that the technical buying process is as good as it can be. But I believe recruiters should be offering more than that.
Okay, so those people that only just met expectations or failed, are they going to get phased out? Do you think that recruitment consultants will be phased out?
I think for parts of the profession, that day's coming. And maybe for parts of it at the lower end of the market, I think it's coming quite fast. If you think about what we've discussed, it's a bit of a tidal wave, not too easy to turn back. You know, we've talked about changes in buying behaviour for B2B services. We've talked about a tougher approach to buying. We've talked about getting with sellers later in the process, if at all. We've talked about commoditization, meeting expectations rather than exceeding them. That research would suggest yes. Last week, I told you about this PowerPoint slide. Last week, I attended a webinar on how much pressure companies are under to reduce the cost and risk associated with recruitment. High volume recruitment in some industries where pay is low, let's be honest, it cannot accommodate high recruitment fees. And when we think what's going to be happening with Brexit, certain industries, certain skills are going to be hard to get. I've seen technology, which is AI driven right now, that is taking care of more and more of the process. Some of it we knew it had. I mean, you know, Monster first came out, when was it? 1996, but advertising, web crawling, social marketing, CV processing and scoring, online questionnaires, simulations, assessments, aptitude tests. So much of it is web driven now. Machine processes have been here for some time. But, you know, I'm beginning to see integrated processes for this now. So I think it's a matter of both cost and time saving. Will there be a place for recruitment consultants in the future? Yes, of course. But for the low level, high volume roles, I think there'll always be pressure on cost. And I think there will be processes that will get smarter and replace recruiters at this end. My fear is that unless we provide good value, that process and that machinery might move up into higher areas of recruitment.
I've recently opened an outsourcing company, which is based in Delhi. We've got 10 staff there at the moment, growing it to about 60 or so. And part of that is this thinking. It's there's always there's a demand for lower costs. So you talk about those lower wage, lower salary bracket jobs. How do you make money filling those? Well, one way is to have a lower cost of delivery. And I think it's sometimes about thinking a bit smarter and using research like this to then think, right, what's my next play? Where do I go next with this? And I'd like to get your view on that. How else can recruitment businesses prepare themselves for what looks like it's a potentially turbulent business climate?
Well, there's almost as many answers to that question as there are recruitment projects to win. But let me offer two robust actions that I normally include when I'm coaching. One is external and customer facing, and the other is internal. The external one, for me, a nice catch-all is to remind ourselves that wherever we work in B2B, and recruitment is no exception, it's important for our revenue our fee generators, our revenue earners, to bring perspective to every interaction with their customers. What do I mean by that? I don't just mean doing the job they've asked you to do, is to give some thought to, can I bring a view of unrecognized problems? Can I help the customer understand a problem about their own business that they didn't see for themselves? Or uncover the magnitude of a problem that perhaps they didn't see, that I can, because I can demonstrate some expertise to them in this field with my experience as a professional recruiter. Can I help the customer to see a solution to their problem that they didn't know existed? So I'm not just another recruitment firm offering to do the job for a certain fee. Can I, when I interact with the customer, uncover unseen opportunities that I can help the customer see that they can gain more from working with me than they're currently getting by doing things their way or with an existing service provider? And finally, can I be a broker of capabilities? Can I make available to my prospective customer here the full range of what my organization can do in a way that contributes to an expansion or redefinition of the customer's success? So I'm not just seen as putting a bum on a seat. That's the external one. The internal one, again, simple. and that is, for any recruitment company owners or senior directors on the call, identify and develop your change makers. Change is not a new concept, it's been around forever, but standing still is not an option. We all know that. Our markets and our customers are changing anyway, and a change maker is someone who sees an opportunity to do things differently and better. They identify, or they're given a specific challenge or project to do, and they try and do something about it. The key is that they work on making a positive difference for the organization they work for. And a good leadership team needs to be able to identify these people with these change-making proclivities, who can make them, good use of this talent and make sure they have them in their team. The proclivities really, I split into 5. You've got the game changers who can bring new ideas and new thinking to the current ways of doing business. Strategists who can review new ideas and see how they fit in. Implementers who work on projects and bring them to fruition, do a damn good job doing it, because someone's got to do the work as well. Polishers who look at current processes and squeeze the best they can out of what's being done now, or any innovative change, to make sure the last drip of value can be extracted from those change initiatives. And there's also a need for playmakers. Those are the people that are skilled at communicating across the whole organization. They can communicate the whole picture to the organization and get everyone committed to the change and the initiatives that come through. And that's, I have always thought, is the best response to really staying on top of these changes, is to make sure you've got these proclivities in your leadership team and in your change management team. And I think this is how recruiters can prepare themselves and always be ready to adapt to a turbulent business climate. You can't control the future, but you can control the preparation.
There's a big difference between a CV sender and a recruitment consultant. And the word consultant gives us all a clue. One example of, I think, what you're saying there, Stephen, was a recruiter who told me when he won the BP account years ago, and this was in Ropemaker Street in the City of London. And he went outside their offices with a clipboard and interviewed people who were leaving the building at, say, 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock. And he drew up information that was then valuable, because he asked a series of questions, put it into some kind of survey report, and then approached one of the key people within those offices saying, I've got some really valuable research about the thoughts of some of the people who work for you. And that was one of the ways that he won that business. So it was very simple, took a bit of legwork and time, but somebody's got that idea in their head, perhaps in the businesses of the people who are listening today. There's somebody, I think what you're saying, what I'm interpreting there is trying to find that person who's got that little bit of innovation or creativity in your own recruitment business, which could be the director themselves, and coming up with something which is adding real value or identifying a problem they couldn't see themselves, I think was what stimulated my thought there. Is that an example?
It's a great example, isn't it? Very, very powerful. I think there's no caveat really, but just to be aware that research is probably worth doing again 2 years later as well, if they feel that enterprising, because things change. It's funny because you mentioned BP, because on the coaching side, I know for a fact that the way they used to hire coaches in to work with their senior executives, that's changed recently, because they're looking at some of the issues that we've just been talking about in terms of vertical leadership. But yes, you've talked about creativity. I think that's part of it. I think a good change maker also has a certain amount of obsession about change. And, there's no psychometric tool that you could end up labeling your change makers in an organization. There's one tool that we use in Changemaker that really just looks at creativity and obsession, because it's how those two balance out, is how you identify who your game changers are, who your strategists are, your implementers. But yeah, if you've got a grafter that's prepared to go outside BP with a clipboard and ask a few questions, that's a pretty good start.
So if you were to give any final tips to people listening today as to practical things they can do, what would those things be?
It's good to develop business when you're busy rather than waiting until things go quiet. I'm sure again on your programs you talk about keeping the funnel filled. It's so important. And if we just accept that the buyers, the customers have got their job to do and are perhaps making it at the moment a little bit difficult for sellers to get in front of people, then it's not up to them to tell us how to do it. It's up to us as sellers to make sure that we have ideas and we have compelling reasons for people to find time in their diaries to see us. So let's make sure that we're well prepared. We've done our clipboard research first, and that when we speak to them, they realize that there is value in them seeing us, because we are going to be bringing something different to that conversation.
Yeah. Well, I saw, I was at the European Executive Search Congress a few years back, excuse me, and there was a HR director from a company called Red Hat, and there was about 100 and so people in the audience. I was one of them. She came on stage and she said, what I want you recruiters to do is to help me with the following. She said, my competitors are Microsoft and Salesforce, not necessarily for the things that we sell, but for the people that I hire. And she said, I want you to show me how you can influence people to want to work for Red Hat rather than wanting to work for Microsoft or Salesforce. So even something as basic as that was her problem. She was outlining it. So any recruiter who, went to a meeting, and the agenda of the meeting, one of the points on the agenda was how we can help position your company more attractively as an employer of choice. Even that gives you a little edge, I would imagine, and certainly what I used to do to get that meeting. Would you concur?
Yep, I would agree. It's a lovely exercise. I bet you've done it yourself. I haven't seen you deliver for a little while now, but I'm sure you do it. I often get my audiences, I get them out, get them at a flip chart and say, right, I want you to write down your top 10 strengths. What are your key differentiators? Write them down, choose a color felt tip, write them down. And then when they've done that, I say, right, now please put a red line through all those that your competitors will be able to claim as well. And quite often that same group of people find they've either crossed them all off the list or they've crossed most of them off the list. And I think it's very important to have that differentiation. Otherwise, if you're competing with Google and Microsoft, as you put it, you take the consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for that insight. Lots of things to go away and think about for anyone who's participated today. You'll see on the screen now Steve's LinkedIn contacts. Please connect with him and add him into your network. And by all means, reach out if you want to have a conversation with Steve at some point. But for today, I'd just like to say a big thank you for your insight, concise, clear, to the point, with some actions that we can all take away and use. Thank you once again.
Thanks, Mike.
Cheers. Bye now.
Bye.